on. So, all right,
All
so
right, let's
continue.
go. Okay. So to respond to your point, I think that's definitely true that a lot of Democrats who have won and people on the left who have won are ones that have been very effective at talking about bread and butter issues. And I take your point, Flav, but I think that's within New York, and that's working families party-based candidates. I was sort of thinking about the direction the National Democratic Party has gone in the past few years. Like, in 2016, Hillary Clinton's big gambit that she lost on was like for every working class voter we lose in Scranton, PA, we win 2 in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And it didn't work out that time. They just lost both groups. But over the past few years, there has been an effort to really remake Democrats, transform Democrats from a party of the working class of all races into this alliance of like working class Black and Latino voters and wealthy upper middle class whites. And I think part of their way of trying to make inroads with upper middle class white voters that used to be Republicans is by being more economically conservative and socially liberal. Like the area Democrats have made gains in recent years have been places like the suburbs of Atlanta, where they've run a very fiscally conservative candidates who are very socially liberal. And that's a problem. I would prefer that they run candidates who are economic populists, and maybe just vary in terms of their cultural appeal from place to place, but are running on a unified message of universal health care. I mean, I really worry, like at the national level, for our potential to be able to ever get an agenda passed that's actually friendly to working people if Democrats continue to sort of have this Frankenstein base of groups who have very disparate economic interests, and where the swing voters they rely on, as opposed to being like, say, working class voters in the Midwest, are like upper middle class voters in Georgia or something, who are more likely to be hostile to unions and more likely to already have good health insurance, so not care about that issue very much.
Sure. Yeah, a national strategy, you mean? Is what we need?
Yeah. I would prefer it to be a national strategy of just healthcare and good jobs, and a Green New Deal, obviously.
I support a lot of left ideas because I think they're good for the economy. That's honestly my modus operandi. Right, I believe in nationalized healthcare because I believe it'll produce a happy citizenry that is happy to work. Sure. The fears of the right saying that if you give people money, you give people this, you give people that nobody will work. That's bullshit. People are hardworking and productive, naturally. It's when they're taken and that their work doesn't matter, that their efforts are minuscule, and this is from both sides. What do you think is going to happen when you demean people's jobs constantly? So, and I think we're just as guilty as the right, if not more so in more insidious ways.
I agree. I agree, although, and I sense that I agree with you on this, but I'm interested to hear you elaborate on what you think the insidious ways are.
Well, I think that they're not insidious as much as they're arrogant and elitist. Our leadership tends to be, the same people we complain about on the right, that we have left versions. Tom Steyer, I can't get his name right, is a billionaire who happens to care about the environment. But, I mean, do you think he made his billions off of environmentally friendly policies? I don't think so.
Definitely not.
I don't think so. And I researched.
Did we get KD back?
No,
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
But Ish, what do you think on this subject?
What's the subject?
It's how the I guess the broad sense is how the Democrats and the Republicans appeal to vote of disparate means. I don't mean poor. I mean different areas. And I think that the right has an easier time because they have less constituencies to worry about, and we're more of a tribal group. Actually, a confluence of tribes.
A group of tribes.
Yes.
Which is what I was going to say.
Yes.
So I think if you're talking about people who are impoverished, right? Well, from the conservative side of things, I think it's easier to cater to those people who support conservatives if you're a conservative. So, okay, ultimately, my opinion is, and I'm going to sound bad when I say this, but I don't really think, it's going to sound bad. At least on the liberal side of things, like people in abject poverty really aren't concerned about voting. Like, it's been my experience. I know, where I came up at, I could probably count on my hands people that are going to the polls. Right? I could literally count on my hands people that are going to vote. I talk to people that don't even have IDs.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they don't even have identification. And I'm not even speaking now when I'm thinking about this. The person that, I'm thinking about that, first comes to mind is a young white guy. And I just remember having a conversation with him. And it was funny because I remember saying to him, and I sounded like a jerk. He's young. At the time he had to be like 21 years old. So at the time he was my daughter's age, but this is a young white guy. And he was going through a situation where he was dealing with an older woman. He had a child with her, and she got pregnant again, and it was questionable whether or not the child was his. But he wanted to know, and she didn't want him to know. She didn't want either of the potential fathers to actually know who was the father. And I found myself and he's, he gets political, right? He can talk political, and he's almost an extremist conservative when he starts talking politics, which is weird to me because he's so young. Half the time I don't think he knows what he's talking about. But I remember saying to him, I said, for someone who leans so far to the right and calls themselves a conservative, a genuine card-carrying conservative would kick you out of the party. Because the way you live your life is and I'm not saying he lives his life like a liberal, is what you accuse liberals for, all the negative aspects of what you accuse liberals of doing. And, I remember we had this conversation, and I said, what you need to do first is get an ID card, right? You need to go get an ID card, a non-driver's ID. And then you need to go downtown, and you need to put yourself on child support. Don't wait for someone else to, and I always tell people this, like, don't wait for someone else to bring these, charges against you, right? You go do it. It's your kid, right?
Absolutely.
It's your responsibility. You know what I mean? You go downtown, and I said, and then based upon that, you can go to family court and get a court order for a DNA test.
Absolutely.
Like, you have rights. You understand what I'm saying? But I said, but in order to exercise these rights, you have to do the things that you're responsible to do. And, I'm only mentioning him because, this is a young white guy who, identifies as a conservative, and he doesn't even have an ID. Now, when I look at the people that I came up with, hang out with on the block in the hood, right? Very few of them actually have identification and could care less about, showing up in November to vote for a thing on local levels or on any level. It's not something that, because a lot of people, and let's not say disparate, right? I'm describing abject poverty. They already feel like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that happens politically is going to help me, and it's because they're just, man, for lack of a better term, ignorant. And I mean true ignorance, and not ignorant as in, you're stupid. You know what I
They
mean?
don't know.
You just don't know. So for me, and now when we look at liberals, right? I think it's hard. I've been quoted as saying many poor people, when poor black people, when Barack Obama ran, they made a black vote. They didn't necessarily make an informed vote. They voted black. One of the reasons why we have Joe Biden, and we have Joe Biden, is because many people made a black vote, right? Joe Biden had street cred. He has the one black friend that you kind of want to have. If you're, in his position, he's got the most important black friend that you could probably have. And based upon that, I would imagine many people, many black people voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Not because they went out and got informed, but because, well,
he was on TV.
He's different.
Yeah.
He was embraced by hip hop, the hip hop culture. Two, he's not one of them, is what was said to me. So I guess to bring it home, when we really talk about, I can't really speak to this conservative side of things, but when we talk about liberals, it's always the same thing for me, right? You have identity groups, and in each identity group, you have people who are on the bottom, right? You have, if you take the black culture, you have those who are informed and those who are in the know, and then you have the people that we like to talk about it. We like to do a lot of emoji talk, but we have these people on the bottom of our culture that, I guess, the lost people in society in every one of these identity groups. Nobody really, really, really takes an interest in them outside of talking points.
Yeah, it's true. And I think you really hit on an important point, Ish, which is that oftentimes the poorest of the poor are people who just don't vote. And I wouldn't say it's always out of ignorance, actually. I think that oftentimes they very genuinely feel like there's no one worth voting for that will meaningfully improve their life. And even if there are differences around the margins between Democrats and Republicans, it's not a significant enough difference to make them actually want to get out to vote. And I, more so than blame them, I blame the Democratic Party for having abandoned poor people, having abandoned working people to chase corporate money. And I mean, maybe, and to some extent, maybe it was always that way. It's just gotten more extreme now.
I mean, when we talk about economic equality, we're talking about the middle class. We should be talking about everybody, but we're really talking about, any level of the middle class, be it lower middle class, middle, upper middle class. But that's what we're really talking about. Nobody is really talking about lower class abject poverty.
Wait, when we're talking about what?
Economic equality.
I mean, yeah, that's who politicians always pander to, is the middle class. It's what they say every election season.
Well, it's because the middle class money runs the country.
I mean,
the middle class stops spending money, we go into recession.
Yeah. And really less so today. I mean, given how much the middle class has declined, a lot of people who once identified as middle class really do not anymore.
But yeah, that's all. I really didn't have anything to weigh in on that, whole discussion. I think it was, you guys were above my pay grade, so I was just listening and being educated.
No, I think you brought up some really solid points, Ish, and I really appreciate that, because I think you built off what I was saying very well, which is that which kind of goes beyond just a matter of what I was talking about, basically, which is how to win over voters. And I guess I was thinking in terms of people who are already voting to begin with, whereas you made sort of an even more salient point, which is that there's a lot of people who just don't even vote at all, and trying to have an agenda that actually is geared, that actually would get people, would incentivize people who don't feel like the system cares about them to get out to the polls. That is something we should absolutely be talking about.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know, again, I can't speak to the conservative side of things, but I imagine it's much the same.
Oh no, it's even worse on their side, sadly, because they basically they pander to the three G's: God's, guns, and God, I forgot the last one.
Germs.
Gays.
Yeah, God's, guns, and gays, and they pander to these things because they're easy bite-sized issues to understand. And if you're quote unquote conservative, and I hesitate to say conservative as much as I want to say Republican, because
Okay.
there's a big difference in my
There's a
view.
difference.
You know,
There's a difference between a liberal and a Democrat.
yes, absolutely.
They overlap in many cases, but they're certainly not the same.
Right. And one is the expression of the party, and the other one is the soul of the party, in my opinion. I think that's the difference between the philosophies and the actual implementation. Like everybody here has gripes against the Democratic Party. There's not a single person I've ever met that is working with the Democratic Party that has said, "Oh, you know what? We're the solution to everything." That's
Well, I have gripes. I have gripes, and I think Joey probably does as well. I have gripes with liberals too.
Yeah, no, me too. Me too.
I don't want to speak for you, Joey. I just kind of.
No, 100%. You absolutely can.
But what I was saying is, I wish KD could come back and weigh in on this. This would be cool. The truth is that for me is that the voting, even if you don't vote, your station in life should be represented in politics. Someone should give a damn, and I say this because we have plenty of programs and plenty of ideas to deal with homelessness, but we don't have anything to do with the working poor anymore, which bothers me tremendously. And I think it is. I think, Joey, your point is very salient. That we focus on these upper middle class voters in the suburbs at the risk of losing the tenet of what the party was started to address, which is non-elites.
Absolutely.
Upper middle class money.
Yes, and influence, because they vote. You are absolutely right, Ish. And I think there's an opportunity with Biden to sweep under a lot of more progressive candidates than Biden. But I think that honestly, I think the strategic goal of anybody running one of the subgroups in politics should be to sweep under plenty of their candidates in smaller positions, much like I advised the third party, the subcommittees, the DSAs, the Tea Party people, whatever, what have you, should be working on smaller victories in order to achieve a larger victory. The neocons were never a huge group. They were maybe 1,000 people when they started, and all they did was work on educational boards to get on educational boards, because they knew it was the easiest thing to get into to start projecting their ideas on the public. And they did it, and they were highly organized and a small group that outweighed their influence, especially during the Bush administration.
Definitely. And that's true. That's true for the movement conservatives as well. They would get very good at learning parliamentary procedures, memorizing the rules of local parties, basically becoming expert at things that almost nobody else was an expert at, and they take over local town and county party committees. They were in it for the long game, basically. And I think actually, for a long time, the left was pretty lousy at that, but they've actually gotten better. I mean, that's why DSA has finally started to make some progress in the past few primary cycles.
Flav, you've been quiet for a while. Let me know what you're thinking.
All right. Well, what are we? What's the kind of summary of where we are right now?
We're just talking about movement politics, and how both, I think, what the most effective ways are of making change for outside groups who don't necessarily have representation in the political system, and also how we could get a Democratic Party that actually does a better job of representing working and poor people, as opposed to catering to upper middle class.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a working families party person, where I stand on that, like when Ish was talking about knowing a lot of people who feel totally, disillusioned or not represented by the system, my first thought is, how many projects have I knocked on doors in, where we had, Democrats that we were trying to bring to the polls and whatnot, or how good of a job does working families do at going into those neighborhoods where it's not middle class folks, but it's actually working class or actually poor folks, and how we actually win. How all of the grassroots people that we get to win, whether it's like AOCs or Jamal Bowman's or all these folks, have folks like on the ground level supporting them, and how we end up holding those folks accountable by going back into those communities saying, like, now that this person is in, we need you to hold them accountable, pick up a phone, let them know how they need to vote on this issue, and just take the grassroots approach to keep people involved, because voting just simply isn't enough. If you vote someone in and they're catering to their own whims, or they fall victim to corporate interest, only Jeff Bezos ends up winning. But if we vote them in, if we have our electorate unified on these issues, and we can hold their feet to the fire, then we can get stuff done. We can keep people involved in the political process, and we can fight for what we want. And we can build a party shaped by a larger percentage of poor and working class folks, instead of kissing up to the folks who have it all and are used to getting their way, with the party and party politics and $1,000 plates and all that stuff.
I agree.
So it's got to be
the
grassroots approach.
Yeah, and I think part of that has to be is that in addition to going to people and telling them to call their representatives and hold them accountable, we also have to do a better job, I think, of for those of us on the left, of making the people we elect fear us, of showing them we have some power, that we have the power to primary them and to knock them off if need be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Raul, there was something else I wanted to ask you. You mentioned that you were advising third-party committees at one point. Which third party and what election was that in?
That was in when I was in Miami, Florida. So we're talking Bush era politics, and I advised both the Green Party. I advised the Green Party here locally in Arizona, in talking to the Libertarians, and I still am. I have still some contacts in the Libertarian Party of Miami-Dade County, which is the largest county in Florida, it covers Miami and other cities in Miami. So the thing is that my support of third parties has always been because I want them to succeed. I don't want them to fail. But
I think they're necessary.
yeah, I definitely they're necessary in order to groom ideas that may not be main street. I say yet because it's important that we view these parties as kind of like innovators of more interesting ideas. Just like the subcommittees in the Democratic Party or the movements in the right, that they're these incubators of these ideas that we need in politics. We absolutely need, and that to me was always my view. And plus, I'm again, I like to say that my thing is I want more people to vote, not less, and I want to give them a reason to vote. Now,
So
does it work?
how do we? And I want to touch on that. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to touch
No,
on
of course,
that.
of course. Go ahead.
How do we get people in poverty to vote?
We give
Like
them a
what?
clear way. We give them a clear way to show that their vote actually matters to them.
Well, hold
You know,
on just a second. Keep in mind that, you know, there have been active measures taken to make it difficult for
yes,
poor people to vote.
absolutely, absolutely. It's the John Lewis philosophy. The more we have equal voting representation, the better and stronger our democracy becomes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right on.
So my thing is continue to make a party or at least both parties or every party accountable to what their solutions are for their very base. I'm not even talking about the other side. What do they do for their base citizens? And if it's just vengeance politics like we're seeing out of Trump or culture war stuff like we're seeing out of some liberals, I mean, really, you expect people to vote for that? That's ridiculous. Over time, you're whittling your vote down.
Exactly. It's true. Yeah. I mean, there's so many people who just don't have time for any of that bullshit, and who can blame them?
Not me. Not
Yeah.
me. I know the frustrations because I trying to get people to vote in Arizona is like pulling blood.
Wow.
There's only a core of people that hopefully see their vote as worth something, even if it's the other side. I don't care at this point. I'm really above the idea of party politics because I want more people to vote, even if they vote for things I I want that representation. I want that diversity in thought in the electorate. Not just several candidates that stand out on the right or left, but actually the electorate itself.
Yeah,
To
absolutely. I mean, you want an active and informed
Yes.
citizenry that like I mean, yeah, even if people are voting for things you disagree with, at least it means that they are informed and they are caring to some degree, and it means there's a greater pool of people that potentially, I mean, even if you are a partisan, potentially could be swayed over because they're actually invested in government as citizens.
Yes.
to answer your question, Ish, what I might do to try to encourage folks to vote who feel disillusioned, I would go into the community, talk to them one on one, and ask them what their issues are. You know, what they care about, what they're frustrated about, what what kind of things they need in the community, what kind of things they're lacking, what kind of things have been messed up in their communities, problems that they've had. It could be anything. It could be problems with uh, could be problems with Project Cops. It could be problems with not having you know running water or not having their building fixed up. And then I would try to work on a campaign to help them get what they need and show them some kind of like victory or solution, and then having shown them some kind of solution, then try to mobilize them and say, well, this is our group. We do this and that, but we're not necessarily Democrats per se. We'll vote for a good Democrat, but we're really this other community group or this third party that wants to fight with you and for you and include you in this, and then just kind of like build, just like do the long, hard work of building in the community, showing myself and really being true, right? Not just showing up when I want to get someone elected, not just showing up when we want to pass legislation, but like actually doing work in the community, standing with the community every time they have beef with their landlord, or standing in the community every time they have a march for something messed up that happened in the community, and really like being with them and showing them like, how we can actually get shit done, and why like grassroots organizing in tandem with voting the right way, and in tandem with bringing up candidates from their community can help get things done, right? So like Marcus down the block, he's a cool dude. He's real smart. He has a lot of great ideas. Everybody knows him and loves him. I wish we had someone like that. All right, let's grab Marcus. Let's have him run. Oh, but he's not a politician. He's never so let's have him run for something local. Let's like have him start from the ground up. Let's have him run for city hall or, school board or like something small. And let's like work on him. He's going to represent us because he's one of us. And then like do all these things together and show people like how to get it done.
That's why.
Absolutely, Flav.
That's why AOC
It's interesting
was so
that
great.
you said.
What'd you say?
It's interesting that you said that, because that's something that I was thinking about, empowering people in these areas,
Yeah.
In these communities, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Putting them in position to actually affect change, or at the very least in the mindset where they can affect change in their own communities as
Absolutely.
representatives of their communities.
Absolutely. We target like activists and people that are known. The woman that we helped win in Philadelphia, her name is Kendra Brooks. She was evicted from her home, homeless with her children. She has been an activist for years, fighting back against the developers and against gentrification and, against all of these issues, and like really working with the people in her community. We got her to win as like the first independent in like half a century to like win that spot, where usually it just goes to Democrats. And we had to do the hard work of showing people, no, don't just vote Democrat this time, vote for them on the independent ticket, right? Like that was like a lot of hard work and took education, because people were just used to voting down the line. So we had to show them like what was up. And now she's like made national history, and like now people are trying to like, model after her, and now they're doing good things, and they're standing up for like defund, the police and like all this other national agenda stuff that we're doing that is difficult, but like we're knocking down the dominoes all over the place. So we got the Jamal Bowmans, the Kendra Brooks, the Mondaire Jones, and like, just help reelect Rashida Tlaib, and like, we're building power across the nation to try to get shit done, abolishing the bail system and all that stuff. So it's like a national platform that we're getting done like locally in all these areas.
I agree. I never worked for the federal system at all. I only worked for a state and below, because I thought that mattered more to the community
Definitely.
that I was serving.
Definitely.
And that's the thing. That's the thing too. I think that we tend to lose track in the business of the fact that we're here to serve the community. Everything else is bullshit. It's just talking out of your ass bullshit. And if you're not serving your community, I don't care how you're doing it. If you think the right-wing, conservative, Trump way is that, make a case for it. Go ahead. I'm more than happy to hear you. But the truth is, if you're not serving your community, I don't understand what you're doing in politics, because you're obviously you are every bad stereotype at that point. And I've called people out for taking huge corruption level actions in the local parties, both in Miami and here, which must have made me very popular. But I call it how I see it, not how they want it to be seen.
Yeah.
We're almost out of time again, guys. Are we going to go another round?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. I'm gonna sign off so I can use the restroom and grab something to eat real quick. I'll be right back.
Cool. So, man,
Joey,
Yeah, ish.
you coming back?
Yeah, no, I'm still here. Yeah.
So
Okay,
people
cool.
have been talking about, they think Raul's been talking about, or was it Raul? People have been talking about, they think 45 is going to like try to stay in there. And it's going to have to be removed by force. What do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely horrifying, but it's also a very strong possibility. It's just we really haven't lived through a situation like that ever in American history. Like, for all our faults, one constant has been the peaceful transfer of power. So it's really so unprecedented that I almost can't wrap my head around what that would be like. I mean, I definitely don't think he has as firm a grip on power as he thinks he does. I mean, they're like the military, and the military is not universally right wing. I mean, he has a lot of staunch supporters, but there would be other factions in the military, generals.
They've already said as much. They've already said as much.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
That they would remove, like, there have already been people saying that they would remove him.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even if that's the thing, there's enough people who, even if they may personally be conservative, even if they may personally have voted for him, still actually take their oath to the Constitution seriously.
Yeah, that would be quite the precedent. That's
Definitely.
Sure.
Well, didn't he ask if he could pardon himself?
He did. Yep, a while back. I mean, I don't know if that would have to do with staying in. I figured he would pardon himself.
Well, no,
for all
it doesn't specifically have to do with him staying in, but it certainly speaks to shady intention. Right?
Yeah. No, it does.
It definitely speaks to, and I'm not talking about what we already know to be true as far as, some of the shady things that he may or may not have done.
Right.
But
right.
I mean, it just kind of gives us
extra pause.
Yeah. Like, well, wait a minute. If this is something that you're questioning, we can't put anything past you.
Yeah.
At the very least, based upon the nature of your question, right? Like, we can't put anything past you. Perhaps you actually would, consider holding the Oval Office hostage.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What kind of person asks